Now, to help make sense of the threat landscape and how the NSA operationalizes insights through collaborative partnerships, Bickley, the chief of DIB Defense at the National Security Agency's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, will join us for an interview session. Bailey will provide an insider's perspective into what DIB contractors should be aware of and how CMMC can better protect those companies and our military secrets. Bailey is responsible for scaling intel-driven cybersecurity solutions across the DIB and has revitalized the NSA's engagement with the cybersecurity community at the unclassified level. She has worked across 2 intelligence community agencies and in the private sector. Bailey, thank you for being here with us today.
Well, Bailey, thanks so much for being here today. Greatly appreciate your time and very excited to have you today. I'd love to just kind of jump right in. It's been a little bit more than a year, I think, since you were named Chief of DIB Defense at NSA's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. I'd love to understand, what are some observations you can share after having spent some time in the role?
Sure. Thanks so much, Eric, for having me here. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in. It's really good to be back with you all this year. And so before I answer that question, I'd like to start with just a brief scene setter of what the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center is, in case there's any new folks on the call today, and I'm sure that there are. So the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center is NSA's way of sharing our unique insights that we have on nation-state cyber activity with industry. And so, for those that aren't intimately familiar with NSA, we have 2 missions, a signals intelligence mission and a cybersecurity mission. And so we actually have a really good understanding of what our adversaries are doing in foreign space. What are their plans, intentions, capabilities in terms of cyber? We have to use those insights to inform how we secure our own networks and how we advise the community to do the same. And so NSA created the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center as a means of doing that. So every day we're working with industry to rapidly sanitize what we know, share it with them so that they can not only use that information to protect their own networks, but to protect the networks of all of their customers. And we're really focused on the U.S. defense industrial base because it's constantly targeted by adversaries and it's extremely vulnerable. This group knows that, more than 70% of the DIB is comprised of small businesses, and those folks deserve to have the support of their government in helping them, combat these nation state adversaries. So I've had this job for a year. It's a wonderful job. And I think, my reflections are we've come a long way, but we still have so far to go. And what I spend a majority of my time doing is educating the DIB community. And what I've found is that, cyber is still new for a lot of folks. They didn't grow up in it. They, are predominantly manufacturers or, a second or third tier supplier to the DoD. And so they're really, really, really good at what they do. They're good at making a widget or a component that goes in a weapon system, but cyber is brand new. And so there's a lot of, education that has to happen in terms of the threats that those companies face and the steps that they need to do to bolster their networks. And so I think it's been a really exciting year. We've seen enrollment in our programs skyrocket, but we still have a long way to go to really securing the defense industrial base at scale.
Yeah, that's a great overview. And I appreciate that because probably half or more of our audience is new, as to your point. Many of them are manufacturers, tool and die makers, architecture and design firms, second, third tier suppliers, new to cybersecurity, and here today to learn kind of what their role is. And I know we're going to talk about some of the programs that you mentioned that the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center has in place to help the DIB. So great overview, very helpful, and I think relevant to the audience today. I'd love to also understand, from your perspective, what are some of the most significant threats, cybersecurity threats, facing these small businesses within the defense industrial base today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a significant amount. And so, I'll start with the nation state adversaries because that's NSA's bread and butter. But really, the People's Republic of China has vast hacking resources, and they are known for hacking the DIB and stealing U.S. intellectual property, proprietary information to build their own militaries and economies from. And I think that sometimes small companies think, I'm not important enough to be a target. And when you have the resources that the People's Republic of China has, frankly, you are. They have, the FBI director has publicly stated their hacking resources outnumber all of those of the US and allied nations combined. So they are able to do mass scanning of the internet, mass exploitation, and there's no company too big or too small to fall victim of that. I think the other thing that I would point out is if folks are not tracking the Volt Typhoon campaign, they should be aware of that. But that is cyber actors looking to pre-position in U.S. critical infrastructure, and our leadership here at the NSA has been very clear that there is no intelligence value for some of these targets, meaning they're not necessarily getting on these networks to get information out of them, but they're pre-positioning to maybe have some kind of disruptive effect at the time and place that they're choosing. And again, I would say if you are a company that is supporting critical DoD programs, you have to be mindful of those types of threats. But then the other threat that really disproportionately impacts the defense industrial base is ransomware. Ransomware actors are constantly targeting small businesses because it's an easy way for them to get a payday. And so this is something that we're constantly telling DIB companies about. One of the primary ways that ransomware actors get in is simply by using publicly known vulnerabilities that DIB companies haven't patched yet. And then they're able to get in and kind of use that your bad day for their economic gain. And so that's another thing that we see a lot in this sector.
What a sobering analysis, and just kind of brings front of mind exactly how kind of real, prevalent, pervasive this threat is for small businesses within the defense industrial base. But with such a large remit, then how does the CCC prioritize its efforts to enhance cybersecurity of the small businesses within the defense industrial base, given all of the things that you just mentioned and the wide array of threats that you have to deal with?
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question. The DIB is vast, hundreds of thousands of companies, and that number changes every day as new contracts are signed. So we have a strategy for how we're really trying to get at this problem from a top-down, bottom-up perspective. So from a top-down perspective, we know that companies, at the end of the day, we're all relying on the same core subset of technology providers for things like our internet, our cloud, the cybersecurity companies we use for incident response, the antivirus providers that we have, right? And so the CCC has made a concerted effort to say, okay, who are, the leading content delivery network companies, cloud, ISPs, cyber companies. And we've gone and we've formed relationships with those companies that are very, very robust and cover a significant amount of the US and worldwide market share for those sectors. And for those companies, what we're doing is we're focusing on sharing our insights on nation state malware, tactics, techniques, procedures, so those companies can build products that defend against what we're seeing. Or so those companies can expose nation state campaigns that are targeting not only the US defense industrial base, but broader critical infrastructure. So we know that by improving the core products we all rely upon, that's going to have a ripple effect. And so that's our top-down approach. The final thing I would say on that is I think that collaboration is very transparent and seamless. People might not realize that it's happening, and sometimes that's the way that we want it to be, to maybe protect sensitive sources and methods, or obfuscate that maybe NSA was the source of information. But that communication and collaboration is happening 24/7, 365. So that's our top-down approach, but we also know that that's not necessarily enough. And so for small businesses specifically, we've worked with DoD CIO, the military services, and the combatant commands to illuminate the supply chains for companies that support DoD priorities. And we intentionally find those second and third tier companies that are likely to be targeted due to the nature of their work, but don't have significant resources. They're not the multi-billion-dollar corporation, right? And so for those companies, we're able to provide them with a core suite of cybersecurity services that help them improve their network security, and also give them access to NSA analysts so they can ask questions and kind of benefit from our expertise in not only nation state cyber threats, but also in just really building and defending our own networks.
It's incredible, and I think it's something in our audience today might be surprised to fully understand and realize that the NSA actually, is a partner. And as you said, these defense contractors deserve the government as a partner to address some of these threats. So the idea that you have programs where kind of a rising tide lifts all boats, but also where, to think that a small business could have access to kind of NSA level resources in the cybersecurity fight is pretty incredible. And I'd love to maybe hear a little bit more about some of the strategies or programs implemented by the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, the CCC. I'll occasionally illuminate that acronym just so for those who are joining a little late. And so what does the CCC do to improve cybersecurity awareness and effectiveness among defense industrial base contractors specifically?
Yeah, so we started by looking at what is the adversary doing? How are they effectively targeting and compromising the DIB? And so then we developed a core suite of services that we're offering for free that address those attack vectors. So for example, we know that ransomware actors, as well as sophisticated nation states, are primarily using publicly known vulnerabilities that haven't been patched to get in, or they're doing exploit chaining, where they're chaining multiple of those vulnerabilities together to get access, go deeper into networks, and exfil information. So we developed a service called Attack Surface Management, where we're helping companies identify their internet-facing assets, do vulnerability scanning across them, but then we're also applying NSA analysis to say, hey, maybe we found these 40 vulnerabilities within your network, but we know adversaries are currently exploiting these 10, so these are the things that you really need to fix. So that's one thing that I think is hugely beneficial. We also saw adversaries abusing DNS. And for those that don't know what DNS is, domain name system, it's the address book of the internet. It's what allows me to type in nsa.gov and it redirects to a machine readable IP address. And because it's so pervasive, our adversaries are able to use DNS. For example, they can set up a spoof website that's just one character off from a website that the DIB is frequently visiting. You go to that website and malware is, unwittingly installed on your network, that type of thing. So we have a service that we offered called Protective DNS, which is simply running any DNS query through a threat feed prior to resolving it, and it's blocking known malicious and suspicious activity. And so for all of our services, we've tried to find things that are easy to use for the DIBs, that it's a set it and forget it thing. And then so they can just benefit from that improved hygiene, that improved product that's running on the back end. So that's been our approach to date. I think it's worked really well, and we are consistently launching new services. We're actually getting ready to launch one this quarter, which I'd love to talk about if y'all are interested. So yeah, I think it's working.
Of course, we'd love to hear that. We'll definitely make time for that. We'd love to understand it. It's pretty incredible, really. And as an American and a patriot and a taxpayer, the idea that the NSA has free services available to the defense industrial base to help them be more secure and actually go from kind of defenseless, maybe with security is not kind of a core competency to more defensible at a minimum is pretty amazing. But there's two sides to that coin, right? Or at least two roles, a minimum of two in that relationship. And the other side, I guess, is the actual defense contractors, right? And so I'd love to hear from your perspective the role of collaboration with the private sector and how that role plays out in the CCC's approach to improving cybersecurity across the DIB.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And when I think about collaboration, it's mutually beneficial. And that's what we've found has come out of all of these relationships. So, NSA, from our perspective, having these relationships with companies, it ensures that the investments that we are making in defense contractors remain secure well into the future. It ensures that our warfighters are safe. And it has an impact on our adversaries. When we're taking away vectors of attack, that has a huge impact. So we get excited about that. But there's also a benefit to us. And so, I think one of the misconceptions that people have about NSA is that we are the all-seeing, all-knowing part of the government. And that is just not true. So we are rightfully limited to what nation state actors are doing overseas. When a nation state actor comes to a US domestic network and infiltrates that network, we're not going to know what they're doing, how they're operating across it. We are rightfully blind to that. And so I think what we've found that has been really cool is our partners will voluntarily offer us information. They'll say, we trust you to protect this information, to protect our reputation, but we're going to give you malware samples, after an incident, or we'll give you some technical artifacts after our systems have been popped. And that really helps us understand the adversary, but also put the pieces together to rapidly expose and mitigate activity targeting in the DIB, to attribute it, better understand, characterize, and respond to it. And so I think it's a really mutually beneficial relationship where we're constantly going back and forth and iterating and having a conversation. And together we can find way more things than we can each find by looking at something from our own vantage point.
Such an important point in terms of the limitations of the role, from a legal perspective, and the need, frankly, for the programs to be effective. For active participation of the DIB and the individual defense contractors, if you think about it in kind of a policing context, in the sense of, they need witnesses, they need evidence, and you need kind of active participants in the program, providing malware, things like that. I mean, it is such a symbiotic relationship that is mutually beneficial. So powerful, I think, message for the audience, and I would implore everybody to participate. And with these programs, Bailey, how does the CCC measure the effectiveness of these cybersecurity initiatives? I know you've had a tremendous amount of growth just in the last year in terms of the programs, but I'd love to understand, how do you measure the effectiveness of the initiatives for the small businesses within the DIB?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have measurements of performance and effectiveness that we track for each of our services. Specifically, we're looking at the number of vulnerabilities found and the number of vulnerabilities mitigated. That's huge. We can tell a company we found something, but it's on them to do that mitigation. We also look at the number of PDNS blocks that we're having, where we're seeing ransomware activity as well as nation state activity being blocked. And then another metric that we track is every week we are updating our block list with NSA's kind of unique indicators of known bad activity that maybe we're getting from signals intelligence or tipped to us from an industry partner or from our own analytics. And so we track how many blocks are coming from those? Are they effective? And so to date, we've seen 4 billion blocks of suspicious or malicious activity across the DIB. We've seen thousands of vulnerabilities uncovered, but more importantly, we're seeing DIB companies mitigate those high criticality vulnerabilities. So we've seen a lot of success. On the threat intelligence sharing side, we really look at we sharing information that's actionable, and we want to know that our partners are taking it and they're able to do something with that for the defense of their networks. And so we kind of have the quantitative measurements that we track, but we also have qualitative measurements as well, where we're really paying attention to customer feedback. And when a customer can say, thanks so much, I was able to take those indicators and, run with them, and here's what I found, that's also a measurement of success.
Yeah, so meaningful because, as our audience knows, putting an ROI, return on investment for cybersecurity, very difficult. But the idea that you have some metrics and have a framework for measuring success, hopefully, will resonate with the audience in the sense that the participation, the time that you're going to put into the programs and being a part of this collaborative partnership with NSA and the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, you can have some way to at least measure your participation in that program, and probably internally even sharper measurements. But just great to know that there is a way to kind of quantify it, because it's always been such a ambiguous thing to quantify the ROI relative to cybersecurity. So just to hear some initiatives there is great.
And I would just add, our DIB customers get access to dashboards where they can see that information. They can see the vulnerabilities found, vulnerabilities mitigated, PDNS blocks. And I think that is a really powerful message for them. If it is maybe a more medium-sized company and they have a board or they have shareholders or whatever, it's a powerful message when you can say, I'm working with the NSA and here's what we uncovered together. And we want to help folks tell that story.
Amazing. Very powerful. Imagine that, tool and die manufacturer in Iowa are pulling up in a board meeting that they've, the NSA dashboard to show some of the effectiveness of the program. That's a very powerful kind of opportunity to be taken advantage of at no cost. Pretty amazing. That actually is a great segue to one of the things I wanted to hear from your perspective around what you see as the key challenges for small businesses within the defense industrial base relative to, cybersecurity generally, compliance more specifically, or just from your kind of perspective, what do you see as their main challenges?
Yeah, I think a couple different things, but the first one that immediately comes to mind is just prioritization. Knowing where to start, what to do, and when to do it is a big one. And so we want to help with that through taking what we know from SIGINT and sharing it, just making sure we're the signal through the noise, so to speak, because every day it's a new incident or it's a new vulnerability or it's something, and people just don't really know, what do I need to do right now? And so we want to help them with that. I think over the long term, one of the things that really concerns me is quantum computing and the eventuality of a quantum computer. That would not only break encryption moving forward, but obviously it has the ability to break all of the encryption of anything collected in the past. And so I think one of the things that I really think about a lot is, as a community, how are we educating each other on what this threat entails and what we need to do today to prepare for it. The U.S. government released a national security memorandum that's really driving the government's transition to quantum resistant algorithms, but we really need to make sure that the DIB is moving in that direction as well. And that requires a lot of work to get there. It requires inventorying your assets and making budget planning decisions, and maybe systems will be taken offline. And so I think just starting to think about that now, even though it doesn't feel like a super urgent thing, is something that's really important to do.
Massive threat on the horizon, and again, heartening to know that the government agencies, the appropriate agencies, are hard at work on that problem. And I love that you started with prioritization, because generally I find people start with cost, and cost is a constraint in every area of our life, whether it's housing, food, cybersecurity, you name it. Cost is always a constraint, and I feel like sometimes cost can be it can be disheartening and kind of resort to do nothing. And the idea of prioritization, I think, so resonates with me, because you can do something. You maybe you can't do everything, of course, but you can prioritize your efforts. And so I love that you started with that, because I think that's, you eat the elephant one bite at a time, and you have to do something, and prioritization is the way to start making progress.
Exactly. And there are low cost things that you can do where you're doing something. I am self-admittedly, I have a bias for action, and I know people will go either way on that, but I'm like, you have to do something. So what can you do today?
Can always do something. I love that. That's great. So how does the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at NSA support small businesses in navigating the complexities of both regulations and standards relative to kind of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think two ways. So first, obviously this is CMMC Con. CMMC is a huge thing on the horizon. And so what we have done is we have made sure that we are able to map our services back to the NIST 800-171 controls, so that we can help companies see there's not only a security benefit to enrolling, but there's also a compliance benefit as well. So we're able to articulate that really well, I think, in our conversations with companies. And we're also working with DoD CIO and DIB CAC to make sure they're aware of our program. They understand how it maps back to controls and how it can help support satisfying some of them. But the other thing I think we try to do is just really be an advocate for the community. We spend every day talking to over 1,000 DIB companies. And so being able to understand their concerns and articulate those to stakeholders, to everyone that's involved in this space on the government side, is something that we take very seriously. And I will tell you that, DoD is phenomenal at listening and hearing feedback and saying, okay, how can we address this? And so we just really try to be a champion for the DIB.
Yeah, for those listening who are not yet participants in some of these programs, I mean, I think you may be surprised what a great partner the NSA and the DoD is. To Bailey's point, the listening part, I mean, I really do think DC3, NSA, DC3 Defense Cybercrime Center, NSA, DoD really do treat the defense industrial base as customers in many regards. And I think it comes through, and it may be surprising to some. And so there's so much value in these programs. And I love the idea that you've done the mapping of the kind of compliance portion to the actual controls, back to the actual services that you offer for free, because so many defense contractors today with CMMC, compliance is the focus. But the idea that you can actually marry the two, and compliance can be a natural outcome of good operational cybersecurity, I think that's the force multiplier. And small businesses, as you know, don't have the resources to focus separately on compliance and security. So that alignment's huge. Bringing it all together, maybe, taking the kind of, you have these operational programs that can actually improve cybersecurity. They're mapped back to some compliance standards. Can you share any recent case studies or success stories where the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at NSA has put this all together and has an intervention that's significantly improved a small business's cybersecurity posture?
Sure. So every week, every quarter, we're collecting metrics and stories from our customers where we're able to see, that PDNS actually blocked them from visiting a site that would have downloaded malware on their system. Or by using vulnerability scanning, they were able to find a vulnerability and close that prior to exploitation, prior to compromise. But I think really cool success stories also come out of our threat intelligence sharing service, where we've had companies come to us with a little bit of information and they're saying, hey, I'm seeing this activity on my network and it's, definitely anomalous. I don't know if it's malicious, but it's not good. And so we've been able to take that information, marry it up against what we know from our sources, and actually find nation state activity targeting these small companies. We've been able to figure out how they got in, attribute that activity, mitigate it, and respond. And so those types of things happen frequently. And we also have a beautiful global signals intelligence system that gives us feedback on how this collaboration has been really successful. And so those are things we get excited about.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, just the idea of closing the loop and not just being kind of, I know many of our audience today are obviously very compliance focused, but the idea that compliance aligned to standards combined with action can actually reduce the kind of attack surface and impact of threats. So amazing. What you mentioned quantum computing, but are there any other emerging technologies or trends in cybersecurity that you think will have the greatest impact on the defense industrial base in the next few years?
Well, I think they would take my government employee card away from me if I didn't mention AI. So AI is definitely something that has changed the landscape. So here at the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, we have an AI security center that's really focused on how do we use AI securely in our nation's most sensitive systems, and how do we partner with AI companies to make sure that our intellectual property is protected. I think the United States is really leading the world in AI innovation, and we want to make sure that we maintain that strategic edge.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Again, so much gloom and doom in cybersecurity, but just it's not all gloom and doom. There's just some amazing programs, and the idea that smart people are hard at work on these problems is it's heartening. How does the CCC, the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center at NSA, facilitate information sharing and collaboration between small businesses in the DIB and larger prime contractors? Do you have a role there?
Yeah, all of our relationships are underpinned by non-disclosure agreements, and that protects the privacy of the company and NSA. It protects the communications. But if a company comes to us and says, hey, I'm working with a managed security provider or an MSSP, or I want to have a conversation with you and my prime because I'm a sub to this program, we can facilitate those communications as well. We really let the company decide what they're comfortable with. And we predominantly use unclassified collaboration channels to communicate with companies. So it's virtual. The workforce is obviously global and many people work from home. They're not physically coming in anymore. So we found that to be the best way. I would say about 80% of our communication with companies is at the unclassified level, but if companies have folks that have clearances and they need to come in and have a classified contextual conversation, we have the ability to do that as well at our center in NSAW.
Well, great to know. And that may kind of leads me maybe to my next question around misconceptions. So the idea that 80% of the communications and kind of collaboration can happen on the unclassified side, it just makes it so much more accessible, which again, another good news story. But kind of what are some of the misconceptions maybe that small businesses might have in the defense industrial base about cybersecurity, and how does the CCC try and address these?
Yeah, we work directly with companies on any of their concerns. I think when we got started in this space, I got this question a lot, like, do people have kind of an adverse reaction to you? Or are they freaked out that NSA is trying to engage with them? And to be honest, what I have found is that the community has been so welcoming. Literally since NSA's inception, we have been in the business of making codes and securing networks. And so I think that there is broadly a recognition of that and an appreciation for the technical talent that that NSA brings to the table. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that there is this big brother misconception. That is just not what I'm finding in my engagements with companies. Is they get it and they're just so grateful for the help.
No, that's tremendous. That's great to hear as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to something you said earlier around, a new program you're getting to roll out, because I think would obviously love to hear about that, and then also just understand some of the CCC's primary goals and objectives for enhancing cybersecurity in the defense industrial base over the next, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. So we're really excited. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. For the past couple of years, we've had 3 core services, which I've mentioned: protective DNS, attack surface management, and threat intelligence collaboration. But in the last year, we piloted a new service. We tried it with a small subset of companies and found it to be very successful. So we're now offering that to anyone that's interested and has an active DoD contract, of course. But the service is called Autonomous Penetration Testing. And it essentially uses AI to replace formerly manual processes associated with pen testing. So you can use a dashboard, customize a pen test of your internal network assets, and then very quickly get a report that says, here's what we found. And when you click into that report, it shows you how to remediate all of the issues found. And so what we found to be really cool with this is, because it's so easy to use, DIB companies are running that report. They're finding the high criticality vulnerabilities. They're patching those and immediately running another report to make sure that they implemented the patch correctly. And so there's this real instant gratification that we're seeing, but just really cool, tangible metrics of how we're finding and fixing things prior to compromise, prior to exploitation. The other feature of this service that I think is super cool is, earlier I talked about exploit chaining, and this dashboard will actually show you, hey, we found these 7 vulnerabilities, whatever it is. And here's how an adversary could chain those vulnerabilities to get initial access, move laterally within your network, maybe steal keys, whatever, and get out. And it will walk you through what that looks like. And so I think it's really important when it comes to prioritization, but also education, helping companies understand, like, here's why you should really care about these, and helping them articulate that. So that's something we're really excited about. It's available now to all of the current enrollees in our program and any new enrollees in the future. Autonomous penetration testing, you heard it here first.
All right, that's amazing. Breaking news. It truly is amazing, because as you were describing those two things, having just spent so much time kind of in boardrooms with customers or at companies directly, is that the idea of being able to kind of show a scoreboard, like, here's my ROI, here's where we spent time, here's the vulnerabilities we found, here's the actions we took, here's the improvements that were made. And to be able to show that is amazing in a free service, but also the exploit chaining education angle that you touched on, so powerful for, as you mentioned earlier, maybe communities and that hadn't grown up with computers, or maybe aren't tuned into computer security. They're focused on their business and doing other things. So just this educational tool to show the how behind this, I think, is so powerful. And I don't know that a lot of people understand this is available. So for those in the audience today, I think very powerful tool for you to, if you don't have a board, your senior leadership team, whoever it is whose advocacy and buy-in that you need to get. I think Bailey shared some incredible tools that are free and available to you. The only ticket you need, it sounds like, is a DoD contract, Bailey.
That's correct.
That's amazing. So very powerful. And you've been super generous with your time, Bailey. So I want to be kind of mindful of that. But one of the things I wanted to ask kind of in closing is certainly any final thoughts that you want to leave our audience with, and how the audience, again, I think we have a pretty large audience today that isn't part of the program today, and we'd like to help drive those enrollment numbers. So how can the audience kind of get involved and become part of one of these programs, and what final thoughts might you have for us?
Yeah. So first, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. In terms of final thoughts, I know National Cybersecurity Awareness Month is right around the corner, and I have a love-hate relationship with October, because I hate awareness. I am about action. do something, which we've talked about. And so I think what I would tell people is make it your goal this October. If you are not enrolled, enroll in the program. The one thing you can do, visit nsa.gov/CCC. One scroll will take you to a little form that says get started today. You can fill out that form, and I think just taking an action, telling your board, telling your shareholders, telling your employees, in honor of National Cybersecurity Awareness, this is what we've done. I think that would be such a big win for everybody, and that's what's really going to make an impact this year. So again, just thank you, and we look forward to working with you all more closely in the future.
I love it. What a great way to close is, both awareness, but awareness supported by action. So let's make that a goal. Let's drive those enrollment numbers. We'll make that link easily accessible. And I want to thank again Bailey Bickley for being so generous with your time. Bailey Bickley from the NSA's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. Thanks again so much, Bailey.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Bailey, for bringing your extensive knowledge and providing key insight and available resources to DIB companies as they adapt to CMMC 2.0.